At 10:22 hours on the 4th of June 1942, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey pushes over into his dive. Enterprise Bombing Squadron 6 follows. 33 SBD Dauntless dive bombers, 20,200 feet altitude, 70-degree dive angle. The perforated dive brakes deploy. They scream as air rushes through. McCluskey aims at Kaga, the largest Japanese carrier. Below him, the flight deck is crowded with aircraft. Engines running. Fuel hoses snaked across the deck. Bombs and torpedoes stacked everywhere. The crew is rearming the strike force. They are preparing to attack the American carriers. They do not see the Dauntlesses until someone screams. Hell divers! McCluskey releases at 1,500 feet. The 1,000-pound bomb falls away. He pulls out of the dive. The G-forces pin him to his seat. His vision tunnels. He recovers. He looks back. The bomb strikes Kaga amidships, near the forward elevator. The explosion tears through the flight deck. Fire erupts from the hangar below. Then the secondary explosions begin. Aircraft explode. Fuel tanks rupture. Bombs detonate. Torpedoes detonate. Within 60 seconds, Kaga is an inferno from bow to stern. Simultaneously, Yorktown Bombing Squadron 3 attacks Soryu. 13 SBD Dauntlesses. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie leads. 3 bombs hit. The first strikes the flight deck near the forward elevator. The second hits amidships. The third hits aft. All 3 penetrate to the hangar deck. All 3 detonate among fueled and armed aircraft. Soryu explodes. Flames pour from the elevators. The entire hangar is burning. 3 Enterprise SBDs peel off from Kaga attack. They dive on Akagi. Lieutenant Richard Best leads. 1 bomb hits. 1 bomb. It strikes the flight deck between the forward elevators. It penetrates to the upper hangar deck. It detonates among armed and fueled aircraft preparing for launch. The explosion triggers chain reaction. Bombs stacked on the deck explode. Torpedoes explode. Fuel ignites. Within minutes, Akagi is engulfed. The attack lasts 6 minutes, from 10:22 to 10:28. 6 minutes. 3 Japanese fleet carriers destroyed. 3 of the 4 carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, all burning, all doomed. The most powerful carrier striking force in the world has been destroyed in the time it takes to boil an egg. This is the 5 minutes of fate. This is how the Pacific War changed. This is Midway. The Douglas SBD Dauntless was not supposed to win the war. It was supposed to be obsolete. Length 33 feet long. Wingspan 41 feet 6 inches. Empty weight 6,533 pounds. Maximum weight 10,855 pounds. Right R 1,820. Cyclone radial engine. 1,200 horsepower. Maximum speed 255 miles per hour. Range 1,115 miles with bomb load. Crew 2. Pilot and radio operator rear gunner. Armament was modest. 2.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns forward firing. 2.30 caliber Browning M1919 machine guns, flexible mounted rear. 1,000-pound bomb centerline. 2 100-pound bombs underwing. The dive brakes were distinctive, perforated plates that deployed from the trailing edge of the wing. They allowed near-vertical dives without exceeding safe speed. 70 to 80-degree dives, from 20,000 feet to bomb release at 1,500 feet. 15 seconds. The steep angle improved accuracy. Bombs released from near-vertical dive travel nearly straight down. Wind drift is minimized. The SBD could place bombs within 50 feet of target from 20,000 feet. This was unprecedented accuracy. The Navy developed dive bombing doctrine in the 1930s. The concept was simple. Horizontal bombing from altitude was inaccurate. Level bombers flying at 10,000 feet had 1% hit rate against moving ships. 1 bomb in 100 hit target. This was unacceptable. Dive bombing offered solution. Steep dive toward target. Release bomb at low altitude, pull out. The physics favored accuracy. The dive bomber became primary carrier strike aircraft. By 1941, Navy carrier air groups had more dive bombers than fighters or torpedo bombers. The doctrine prioritized what worked. The SBD entered service 1941. It replaced older models, SBU Corsair, SBC Helldiver. The Dauntless was superior. Better speed, better range, better dive characteristics, better survivability. The aircraft was rugged. It could absorb damage and continue flying. Pilots called it slow but deadly. The initials matched the designation. The nickname stuck. On December 10, 1941, 3 days after Pearl Harbor, SBD pilot from Enterprise attacked Japanese submarine in 70 off Hawaii. The submarine was sunk. First enemy vessel sunk by American forces in World War II. The SBD drew first blood. This was prophetic. The Dauntless would sink more enemy shipping than any other Allied bomber in the Pacific. Over 300,000 tons, 18 warships, dozens of transports and auxiliaries, the slow dive bomber became the most lethal aircraft in the Pacific. But at Midway, the SBD was nearly too late. The battle begins June 4, 1942 at dawn. Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu launch 108 aircraft against Midway Atoll. The strike hits at 0630. Marine fighters and anti-aircraft guns defend. The damage is limited. Midway remains operational. The Japanese strike returns. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo decides second strike is necessary. He orders aircraft on his carriers rearmed for land attack. Torpedoes are removed. Bombs are installed. The crews work frantically. Deck is cluttered. Ordnance is stacked everywhere. At 0705, Japanese scout plane reports American ships sighted. Nagumo receives the message. He is confused. American carriers were supposed to be at Pearl Harbor. Intelligence said no carriers were near Midway. The scout report changes everything. If American carriers are present, his strike force needs torpedoes, not bombs. He orders rearming again. Bombs are removed, torpedoes are installed, the crews reverse the process. More ordnance stacked on deck. More clutter, more chaos. While Japanese crews rearm aircraft, American carriers launch strikes, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown. 151 aircraft, 54 torpedo bombers, 71 dive bombers, 26 fighters. The problem is coordination. The aircraft launch separately. They fly at different speeds. Torpedo bombers cruise at 115 miles per hour. Dive bombers cruise at 180 miles per hour. Fighters cruise at 200 miles per hour. Coordinating arrival over moving target is impossible with 1942 technology. American commanders decide to launch aircraft as ready. Small groups depart sequentially. They will attack independently. This decision dooms the torpedo bombers. It saves the dive bombers. The torpedo bombers attack first. Hornet Torpedo Squadron 8, 15 TBD Devastators. They attack without fighter escort. The escort got lost. At 0920, VT-8 begins their attack run. Slow, low, predictable. The Japanese fighters slaughter them. All 15 are shot down. Only one pilot survives. Ensign George Gay. He floats in the water. He watches the entire battle from sea level. Enterprise Torpedo Squadron 6 attacks at 0940, 14 TBD Devastators. Fighter cover is minimal. The Zeros attack. 10 torpedo bombers are shot down. 4 return to Enterprise, no hits on Japanese ships. Yorktown Torpedo Squadron 3 attacks at 1010, 12 TBD Devastators with fighter escort. The Japanese fighters penetrate the escort. 7 torpedo bombers are shot down, 5 return, no hits. 41 torpedo bombers attack, 35 are shot down, 85% casualties, 0 hits on Japanese ships. The sacrifice appears futile. But the torpedo attacks accomplish something crucial. They pull Japanese fighters down to sea level. Zero fighters chase torpedo bombers at wave-top height. They are perfectly positioned to intercept low-altitude attacks. They are perfectly out of position for high-altitude attacks. The dive bombers are coming from 20,000 feet. The Zeros are at 100 feet. They cannot climb fast enough. The sacrifice of torpedo squadrons creates window for dive bombers, but the dive bombers cannot find the Japanese fleet. Wade McCluskey leads Enterprise Air Group, 37 SBD Dauntlesses from bombing 6 and scouting 6. He flies to expected intercept point. No Japanese ships. The ocean is empty. McCluskey must decide, return to Enterprise with fuel remaining, or continue searching. He continues. He turns northwest. This is calculated guess. Japanese carriers were heading southeast toward Midway at dawn. They may have reversed course. McCluskey gambles. He searches northwest. At 10:05, McCluskey spots destroyer wake. Destroyer Arashi. She was depth-charging submarine Nautilus. The submarine escaped. Arashi is returning to the carrier group at high speed. McCluskey follows the destroyer's wake. At 10:20, he spots the Japanese carriers. 4 carriers in loose formation, aircraft spotted on decks, engines running, perfect targets. Yorktown dive bombers arrive simultaneously. Pure coincidence. Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie leads Yorktown Bombing Squadron 3, 17 SBD Dauntlesses. Leslie's bomb fell off during launch. Electrical malfunction. He leads the attack without a bomb. His squadron follows. The Enterprise and Yorktown dive bombers arrive over Japanese fleet within 2 minutes of each other. 54 SBD Dauntlesses. No fighter opposition. Japanese Zeros are still at sea level chasing Phantom torpedo bombers. The dive bombers have clear sky. McCluskey assigns targets. Enterprise bombers will attack Kaga and Akagi. Yorktown bombers attack Soryu. At 10:22, the dive begins. 70-degree angle. Perforated dive brakes screaming. Airspeed 250 miles per hour. Stable, controlled. The pilot aims through simple sight. Ring and post. No computers, no radar, visual bombing. From 20,000 feet, the carriers look like toys. But the SBD is accurate. The pilots are trained. They have practiced for years. This is what they do. The Japanese are unprepared. Lookouts spot the dive bombers too late. Anti-aircraft guns traverse slowly. Tracking aircraft diving at 70 degrees requires leading the target. Calculating deflection. Japanese gunners have no time. A few guns fire. Shells burst randomly. Most bombers are not engaged. They dive unmolested. They release at 1,500 feet. They pull out. The bombs fall true. Kaga is hit by 4 bombs, possibly 5. Sources disagree. The first hits forward, the second hits amidships, the third hits aft. All penetrate the wooden flight deck. All detonate in hangar. Armed and fueled aircraft explode. The hangar becomes furnace. Fire spreads instantly. Within 3 minutes, Kaga is burning from stem to stern. The crew fights fires. They cannot control them. Ammunition cooks off. More explosions. At 1925, Kaga sinks. Soryu is hit by 3 bombs. All penetrate to hangar. All detonate among aircraft. Secondary explosions rack the ship. Fire spreads through ventilation system. Smoke fills the ship. The crew abandons damage control. At 1913, Captain Ryosaku Yanagimoto orders abandon ship. He goes down with his ship. 718 men die. Soryu sinks at 1920. Akagi is hit by 1 bomb. 1 bomb. Lieutenant Richard Best drops it. The bomb strikes between the forward elevators. It penetrates to upper hangar deck. The Japanese have stacked ordnance throughout the hangar. Bombs, torpedoes, fuel drums, aviation gasoline. The single bomb triggers catastrophic chain reaction. Explosions ripple through the ship. Fire consumes the hangar. The flight deck buckles. The carrier list to port. Admiral Nagumo transfers his flag to light cruiser Nagara. At 0500 hours June 5th, Akagi is scuttled by Japanese destroyers. 267 men die. 3 carriers destroyed in 6 minutes. The 4th carrier, Hiryu, is 10 miles north. She escapes initial attack. She launches 2 strikes against Yorktown. Both strike home. Yorktown is crippled, but American scout planes find Hiryu. At 1700 hours, Enterprise launches 24 SBD Dauntlesses. 14 are orphaned Yorktown aircraft operating from Enterprise. At 1705, the dive bombers attack. 4 bombs hit, possibly 5. Hiryu burns. She is scuttled early morning, June 5th. 389 men die. 4 Japanese fleet carriers sunk. 2,275 naval aviators lost. 100 pilots, 275 air crewmen, 1,900 enlisted deck crews. Japan loses half of its fleet carrier strength. Japan loses irreplaceable pilots. Japan loses irreplaceable maintenance crews. Japan loses 6 months of offensive capability. The strategic balance in Pacific shifts permanently. American losses are severe but sustainable. Carrier Yorktown sunk by submarine. Destroyer Hammond sunk by same submarine. 147 aircraft lost. 307 personnel killed. The losses hurt. But America replaces them. Essex-class carriers are under construction. Pilot training programs expand. Within months, new carriers join the fleet. Within a year, American carrier strength surpasses Japanese. By 1944, American carriers outnumber Japanese carriers 10-1. Midway begins this transformation. The controversy over Midway continues. Was it miracle? Was it luck? Was it skill? The answer is complex. McCluskey's decision to continue searching was brilliant. Following Arashi's wake was inspired. But both were calculated gambles informed by training and experience. The simultaneous arrival of Enterprise and Yorktown dive bombers was coincidence, but they arrived because their commanders committed to the attack, despite uncertainty. The absence of Japanese fighters over the carriers was consequence of torpedo bomber sacrifice. The destruction of 3 carriers in 6 minutes resulted from Japanese carriers being caught with armed and fueled aircraft on deck. This was consequence of Nagumo's rearming decisions. Every factor mattered. Remove anyone, outcome changes. But the fundamental factor was the SBD Dauntless. The aircraft was designed for this mission. Sink enemy carriers. The perforated dive brakes allowed controlled steep dives. The rugged airframe survived pull-out stresses. The accuracy was sufficient to hit carrier flight decks. The bomb load was sufficient to penetrate wooden flight decks and detonate in hangars. The range was sufficient to reach Japanese carriers and return to American carriers. The SBD was right aircraft at right time. The crews were trained. Navy dive bomber pilots practiced for years. They knew their aircraft. They knew their tactics. They knew how to aim through ring and post sights. They knew how to compensate for wind. They knew how to adjust for target movement. They executed under pressure. Many were combat veterans. Coral Sea. Torpedo attacks earlier that morning showed them their brothers dying. They knew the stakes. They pressed their attacks. They placed their bombs on target. They won the battle. The Japanese made mistakes. Nagumo rearmed aircraft twice. This scattered ordnance across hangar decks and flight decks. When bombs penetrated to hangars, secondary explosions were inevitable. Better practice was keeping ordnance in magazines until needed. Japanese doctrine emphasized quick turnaround. Speed over safety. This doctrine killed 3 carriers. The lack of radar prevented early warning. Japanese lookouts spotted dive bombers visually. Too late. American radar detected Japanese strike aircraft at 60 miles. Time to scramble fighters. Time to prepare defenses. Japanese had no radar, no warning, no time. Japanese carrier design emphasized offense over defense. Wooden flight decks, exposed elevators, minimal hangar armor, inadequate fire suppression, inadequate damage control. When fires started, they could not be stopped. American carriers incorporated lessons from British experience, armored hangars on later designs, better fire suppression systems, better damage control doctrine. Yorktown survived 2 Japanese strikes. She was abandoned, but still afloat when submarine found her. Japanese carriers could not survive single bomb penetrating to hangar. The 5 minutes at Midway represents convergence. Right aircraft, right tactics, right training, right timing, right targets in right condition. Remove any factor, outcome changes. The SBD Dauntless was designed to sink carriers. The pilots were trained to sink carriers. The opportunity presented itself. 3 Japanese carriers caught with armed and fueled aircraft on deck. No fighter cover overhead. The dive bombers executed perfectly. They sank 3 carriers in 6 minutes. This was not miracle. This was design philosophy vindicated. This was training justified. This was calculated gamble succeeding. Admiral Chester Nimitz said it best. Midway was essentially a victory of intelligence. American codebreakers provided warning. Nimitz positioned his carriers to intercept. The battle was won before first shot fired. Intelligence won, but intelligence alone was insufficient. The dive bombers had to execute. They had to find targets. They had to attack accurately. They had to survive. The SBD Dauntless and its crews did all these. They turned intelligence into victory. They turned opportunity into triumph. On June 4, 1942, at 10:28, 3 Japanese carriers were burning. The 5 minutes of fate were over. The Pacific War had changed. Japan would never regain offensive capability. America would never relinquish initiative. Midway was turning point. Not because of miracle, because of preparation meeting opportunity, because right tools employed correctly produce results. The SBD Dauntless was right tool. Wade McCluskey and his pilots employed it correctly. They changed history in 6 minutes. Slow but deadly indeed.